Everybody here ready?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe since it's a joint meeting and some of us might not know others, we can start with brief introductions. I'll start. Connor McIver, Town Administrator. I have for the last couple of years been attending all the budget committee meetings. And so that I spent a lot of time with our friends in the budget committee. And yeah, looking forward to getting some recommendations, some decisions made tonight. And maybe we'll start virtually if you're still with us and active. We'll loop around the other way. So Marjorie.
Yes. Yeah.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Marjorie Shepherd, and I've been on the transfer recycle committee for maybe been 2 years now.
Fantastic. And Bill, are you able to, oh, there you go. Beautiful.
There I am, trying to keep the bandwidth down, you know. Bill Irving from the Budget Committee.
Fantastic.
Doug Winter from the Transfer Station Committee.
Erin Paradise, Highway Department / Transfer Station Administrator.
Luna LaPierre, Transfer Station Committee alternate.
Lou McCutcheon, Lead Attendant, Transfer Station.
Dan Manshak, Select Board. I'm representing both these committees today. So.
Right? Probably good.
Steve Saunders, and Chair of the Budget Committee, been there several years now.
White House, ABC, for a couple of years at least.
Scott Shepherd, Budget too, ABC.
Alternate for the transfer station recycling.
And Pat Mead from the Transfer Station Committee.
Bob Lindsay, Transfer Station.
Peter Royce, an alternate to the Budget Committee and a member of the Transfer Station.
Fantastic. Okay. Yes, please.
Somebody taking minutes for this? Like we usually have Peter doing it. I don't know who usually does the other.
You mind?
Is it necessary?
Sure.
Okay, cool. It is necessary, absolutely necessary. One of the benefits is starting this year, we've been recording all of the budget committee meetings. So it'll be recorded and we'll have that recording. And so we can fill in the minutes there. And that. So the agenda is two primary items. So I've been a little bit more disconnected from the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee, but I understand a part of the conversation really since the inception has been this idea of revenue generation at the facility and expenses at the facility. Obviously, two big tasks that the committee undertook in the past 2 years was one, completely overhauling the fee schedule. To make it easier for attendants to collect the fees and to make it easier for residents to understand what fees they should anticipate paying. By most measures, that's been a success and certainly better than it was before. And then more recently, leading a charge to update the trash bag fee, per trash bag fee, which was something that hadn't been done since the 90s.
1987.
The 80s. Probably better than the 90s, but
It was a great year.
Yeah,
It was a great decade.
couldn't
Yeah.
tell you. Yeah. So anyways, but in the background of those conversations was very surely a big picture question about what is the appropriate level of funding from user fee revenue versus taxpayer dollars. And so a topic of conversation is this idea about revenue. That's something that the budget committee talks about every single year. The budget committee looks at the operating budget that everybody is requesting and balances that against the revenue that we anticipate. So 48% of the revenue to fund our operating budget comes from property taxes. More than half, 52%, comes from other sources. And a big piece of that is fees for service, like the transfer station, like building permit fees, like ambulance fees and others. And so when the budget committee is looking at the revenue of the transfer station, they're comparing that to the requested operating budget and trying to balance those scales. So the second topic is a conversation about what to do in 2027. And I don't think that we're going to solve that problem tonight, but I want to pitch to you an idea that I introduced to the select board over the summer and have some conversation about pros and cons of that idea. So 2027, as you know, is the year that our waste management disposal contract expires. Now, let me tell you, if there was a sweet deal to be had in tipping fees for municipal solid waste, we have it. It is a fantastic contract we're under, and
We didn't think so at the time.
somebody dusted off their crystal ball and knew for sure that this was the way to go. So I won't, there's a lot more to the history, and maybe the committee has talked about it in detail. Waste management asked for an increase. The select board said, we don't want to give you an increase, but we would entertain a contract extension as part of integrating an increase. Waste management came back with a crazy proposal that increased the fees dramatically. I kind of forget the numbers. It's been a while, but dozens of a % per year for every year until 20, whenever it's yeah, till death do us part. So the select board said, thanks, but no thanks. And we like our contract now. And that was over the summer when we started talking about, we shouldn't sit on our hands and just wait for 2027 to happen, because we know that costs are going to go through the roof. And we know what other communities are getting for tipping fees. And it's very clear to us that we are going to have a problem. Our residents are going to have a problem in 2027 if we do nothing. The problem is, it's kind of difficult to figure out what to do. You can sit here and say, yes, something bad's going to happen in 2027, but within the confines of a municipal government, it's difficult to prepare, in the most efficient ways. Anyways, what I recommended to the select board was something that's called a special revenue fund, essentially allow us to start saving money now by increasing fees gradually, to some extent aggressively. So when we get to 2027, one, we have some cash on hand to buy down or ease into the increased cost, but also we have for 3 or 4 years increased rates to a point where residents aren't surprised by a doubling of rates in 1 year that we built up to that. And so those are the two topics. The budget committee has talked about that special revenue fund just tangentially. But we were talking about revenue and revenue targets, and that seemed like a good idea. Hey, let's bring the two groups together. Let's make some decisions, make some recommendations, and have a roadmap forward. We can always make changes down the line. So I trust everybody's read the email, and with that brief introduction, we know the topics to be discussed a little bit. Does anybody have a sense for what we should discuss first? They kind of like overlap.
I think the appropriate starting point is what percentage do we think the revenue should cover? Is it just expenditures for disposal, or is it all the expenditures? And I sent out an email. I hope everybody got it. But the variable, if you will, is are we using what Erin's using, which are her numbers, which are what she anticipates are expenditures and revenues, or are we using the AccuFund numbers? And I use the AccuFund numbers, and I use the budget numbers, not the actual expenditure numbers. So Erin, in her email, said 65. I said 59. That's because we didn't expend everything that was anticipated in 2022. So if you're wondering why the numbers are different, that's why. And again, to me, if you look at the budget numbers, budgets never seem to go down, right? They never go down.
Correct.
So I use budget numbers, not actual expenditures. And so my 59 is opposed to Erin's 65. Goes back to the old saying, figures lie and liars figure. So take your pick.
In your case, you can do both.
Indeed, I can, yes, because I'm very agile.
Any objection to starting with revenue? Awesome, please.
This has come to my mind. When I moved here, I would not have known where to bring my trash.
Mm-hmm.
So the number one thing I see on the community page is, can somebody recommend a trash pickup?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about survey. The transfer station serves about routinely 30% of the population, from what I heard. So there's another 70% population And they're paying for their own service. So I just wanted to, are people aware of that discrepancy that a very small population does use the transfer station?
Right, and that's an interesting point for a couple of reasons. I'm curious about the 30%. I have not heard that number before.
25, 30. Yeah.
Yep, but where does that come from? Measured how?
CMA.
They
Did
did,
that estimate.
they did that estimate based on, okay, tonnage. Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's some assumptions.
Right, would have had to.
Tons per person or whatever.
Right, which this committee has done a good job of educating residents on waste reduction. So I would argue Barrington residents probably generate less waste per person than others. Wishful thinking, yeah. So, but the other point that you make, which I think is an excellent one, is that yes, there is a free market out there that solves this problem for people. So that I think begs the question, for those residents, a majority of residents by that estimation that use an outside service, how much of their tax dollars should be funding the facility that they're not using?
That's where.
And now I will say those private haulers, a lot of them don't do recycling and people want to recycle. So they bring that. And we know that has a cost. The bulky waste, they come, yes, they pay the user fees, but there's administrative costs of those. When they do their spring cleaning, they probably haul a bunch of contractor bags down and, so even residents that have trash pickup probably use the facility some.
Little, yeah.
But I think it's an excellent point that there is another service and it's almost like an a la carte, right? Do you want to use the transfer station? You can pay for it through user fees. Do you want to use a contractor, an outside contractor? You can pay their rates and, a lot of your taxes won't be diverted here. So with that in mind, what's a good target? Right now, we're at 65-ish, up from 50%. Remember, we updated the rate structure in 2020, and then we increased bag prices in 2022. So you see those two big steps in percentage.
22 or 20?
Or 21, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I don't remember.
So what would throw a number out there?
I don't know. I just
Mhm.
wanted to know if people were aware of that.
Right.
And I've talked to a lot of people
Mhm.
and they don't go to the transfer. They'd like to have, well, it's a free market. Somebody needs to get in the recycling business for pickup as well.
Mhm. Right. If it didn't cost more than disposing of MSW, maybe more people would, right? What are some other thoughts on this idea of revenue and resident choice for services?
Well, I'll just say the recreation department, the town pays for the staff, so we pay to have the facility there. And then the people who use it actually pay as well. And that seems like a reasonable way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what percentage that is? Like,
It's almost 50-50. Peter did the analysis of 2022. We are meeting based on expenditures, not budget, we are meeting the administrative overhead with our current revenue level and presumably rate structure. Dan?
Would point out that there actually is an ordinance text in somewhere that requires recycling.
Mhm.
From an enforcement act.
yeah, it's mandatory.
Yeah, it's mandatory, but no sanctions.
Right.
So we're currently paying 59% of the total budget as of 2022.
Right.
From, and again, I would like to point out.
Sorry. Some instructions for you.
The select board was willing to raise rates and raise bag fees. It made a substantial difference.
So we're paying 59%?
Of the overall cost.
Yeah.
Revenue does, property taxes.
Revenue are, because I'm trying to.
Yeah, so what this
Okay.
data shows is, and this is just expenditures and revenue. So, and this goes back to 2017 here on the left. And so the expenditures is audited year-end expenditures, which,
Just for the transfer station.
yeah,
Okay.
just for the transfer station. And that's both administrative costs and tipping costs combined. And then the revenue for all revenue categories of the transfer station. So obviously the operating budget has increased, although not dramatically, between 2017 and 2022 from 327,000 to 348,000. But revenue has increased 162,000 to 225,000. we were at 50% in 17, 52 in 18, 49 in 19, 61 in 20, 69 in 21, and 65 in 22. And what Peter's saying is the emerging percentage funded through revenue so far through 2023 is 59.
No, I was using 2022 numbers.
Yeah.
But again, the difference is what AccuFund has as expenditures. And what the budget was. I use budget numbers to get to the 59.
Right.
So
We're almost talking about a philosophical idea, right? We'll never be exact.
Right. That's an excellent point, because practically speaking, if we say the number 75% and the select board supports that, what I want to use that number for is as a 1 year look back to consider changes to the transfer station fees to make sure we're meeting that target. So if this year we're at 65% and the target 75%, in the beginning of this year, I would have said, hey, we should look at increasing the fees 10% across the board to get to that 75%. That's our target. Or if we're collecting 90% of the fees, well, you know what? Maybe we want to set some money aside, or maybe we want to reduce fees. But that's the tool, to Mr. Shepherd's point.
Is the idea that 70, let's say it's 75%, would that include the amount we're squirreling away in the savings account?
Excellent point. And that's the overlap. No. As I presented to the select board, no. And I'll just take that point one step further for understanding's sake. In order for the special revenue fund to work and not negatively impact the tax rate, we need to continue collecting revenue in the general fund, which is where all the revenue goes now. So we would set a benchmark. Maybe that benchmark is a dollar value, 225,000. Maybe that benchmark is a percentage, 75%. We would continue collecting that. So if costs of the facility went up, that would expand as well. But for the special revenue fund to work, we would need to collect revenue in excess of that to be able to set it aside. And that, again, accomplishes two priorities. One, incrementally increasing rates, so residents aren't shocked by a doubling of rates in 2027. But also collecting that revenue, setting it aside. So in 2027, we could pay 50% of the fees for the first year to reduce the amount that ratepayers or the property taxes are having to pick up. Or, crazy idea, we could look at the money that's available there and consider buying a flatbed truck to haul our own containers. And but it gives us options because we have that money set aside. So that would be above and beyond.
And would that above and beyond money be coming out of fees or taxes?
Fees.
Fees, okay.
Fees.
So to me, it's related, you know. Like
It definitely is.
If we're gonna decide whether it's 55%, 65%, or 75%, and then if there's something on top of that, to me, that influences that number. You know, how much are you gonna raise the fees without that extra money, you know?
It's an excellent point. And undoubtedly, if we have support to go down both of these paths, undoubtedly in 2 years' time, or maybe even next year, our fees should be bringing in enough revenue to cover 100% of the facility. But we're just putting 75% into the general fund because that's the target, and then the balance in the special revenue fund to save for the inevitable doom and gloom of 2027.
So is that special revenue fund only for the transfer
Yes.
station? Okay, so it's not commingled in the general fund and.
Exactly. Yep, excellent point. Yeah, so it's money in, money out for the specific purpose of transfer station facilities.
So what could happen is if these fees get so high, more people may go to private haulers.
That's what I'm afraid of.
But it'll ultimately reduce the cost on the other end. right?
Now, why are you afraid of that?
Yeah, I'm curious. to-
Because I've talked to a couple of neighbors about the transfer station. They said, Bob, I just don't want to deal with bags. And I asked them what they paid, which was very reasonable. I wish I didn't bring the.
But why is
figures.
that a bad thing? It reduces tonnage at our facility?
Well,
reduces
I
direct
think the
costs?
transfer station we should be drawing more than 25%. To me, I mean. it should
That's an
be-
interesting perspective.
It should be more of the town is willing to use the transfer station. I just don't think we should be doing things that would drive people away. I mean, that's
Yeah.
25 is
Can I
a low percentage now.
Remember though, I mean, if it was really 75% of the people not going to the transfer station, I would see garbage cans at 3 out of 4 houses every week and I don't. So it makes me think a substantial number of people in the town use the transfer station. I don't get that number. I would say maybe the opposite way, 30% of people use an external provider, but I don't know.
We have a mixed use facility, meaning that because of how some of the areas are in town and your, neighborhoods, we have trailer parks and they have trash pickup there, but they don't have bulky waste disposal. So those people use the facility for that. Or, Deb, I'll put you on the spot, but just say she has trash pickup, but they don't recycle. She comes to the transfer station and recycles. So we do definitely have a mixed use of residents who come and utilize it in different ways.
The other thing I've seen with the private pickup is the garbage cans aren't out at the road. They actually go up there.
Not in our neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah.
Oh, they're out and outside.
Where we are, they seem to go up the drive.
But I guess it's neither here nor there,
Yeah.
really. It's a philosophical
Yeah.
question again.
You know, it would be interesting. We could make a list of the private haulers. Call them. How many accounts do you have in Barrington? Or worse they could say, they don't share, but chances are they say, hey, we have this many, and then get it straight from the source.
And where do you bring it?
They bring it to waste.
Definitely bring it to waste.
It's the closest, and they pay per ton, a higher rate per ton than we do. But you see the equipment that they drive. Peter's convinced that they scatter the trash all over Tillman Road. And probably
I pick it up regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I encourage this picture.
Steve, please.
I'd like a sort of a little bit of education in terms of the long term. If there are options that we'll be pursuing, whether it's on our own or going to somebody else, there will still be administrative costs associated with the town would have to pay to manage that process. Do we have any idea what the various options are that would, and what the administrative costs for those would be?
Excellent question. And so I don't know for sure if this is what you meant, but in case somebody thought this is what you meant, we will always have to have a transfer station. We have a statutory responsibility to always operate a facility to take, I forget how the statute words it, waste generated within the community. I think is the loose terminology that it uses. So regardless, even if we had door-to-door trash pickup, we still have to have a facility that people can bring their waste to. And so I haven't heard an idea that changes the level of service dramatically in 2027. So our options, a myriad of options, but the options that I've discussed with the select board and we've discussed conceptually are having a tipping and hauling contract with Waste Management, a new contract in 2027, same as we do now. They own our cans, they rent us some stuff. They rent us one of our compactors.
We rent one and we own 3 of them.
So we rent stuff from them, we send stuff to them, they haul stuff for us, etc. Another option, like the town of Durham, for example, does, is they collect waste at their facility and haul it on their own to Waste Management. We could have a tipping contract with Waste Management that negotiates rates for tipping fees for MSW per ton. But we would own all of our compactors. We would buy a truck that roll on container, bring it up to turnkey, weigh it, dump it, weigh it, bring it back, So that would be another option. We would still collect all of the waste at the transfer station facility. So to your point about administrative costs, I don't anticipate that the administrative costs of collecting the trash would change dramatically. The administrative costs of hauling our own would mean staff to haul our own, maintenance of the vehicle. And so that we would certainly have to take a deeper dive, I would say at that point, before we entertain buying a truck, to do a cost benefit once we knew what the hauling fees were going to be and do an analysis of what we anticipate that cost to be. I guess my point about the special revenue fund is we don't have to decide today how we're going to use that money in 2027. If we agree that it's a good idea to set it aside so we have options, that's a decision we should make today.
The reason I brought that up is because I want us to come up with a strategy that says it's consistently going to proportionately cost the town taxpayers a consistent amount regardless of what option.
Good point.
pursues. So to do that, we take the model of the rec department or here, and we say, let's take all the staff that is required to manage or operate. And let's use that as the benchmark of what the town pays. And then all the rest of the expenses need to be recovered through the fees that are charged.
Even contracts like the water monitoring,
Fees for which,
like water monitoring, you wouldn't want to include that?
that would be a town responsibility.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
differing from what you just said. In that it's not just personnel costs, it's
Well,
costs that were
if
locked
we
in.
can identify those and parse them out, then I would agree, take the administrative costs. And then add those other things that are town responsibilities that have that cost associated.
Essentially, the cost of removing anything would be supported by the bags and fees that people.
Or whatever fee structures come up with. And when I ran some rough numbers on that, if I took the existing staff. And said that was what cost percentage of transportation budget, is that today? It's 25%. So that's part of what I would potentially say is a possible option. When we look at what the percentage should be, and it's easier to administer if we use it in terms of personnel plus this line item of the budget, rather than say a percentage that can change. And then if those administrative costs, coalition and cost of living go up, then we have to add people, you say, okay, that's part of the administrative cost that the town will pick up.
And that's a common one used in other agencies as well.
So would that include like equipment, maintenance, and things like that, or?
Those are, if those are not charged to the transfer budget today, those are covered by other.
Let's look, so this for the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee, this is where the Budget Committee spends all of their time. You can spend your time there too, if you want, at barrington.nh.gov/2024 budget.
When you need to go to sleep.
Yeah. So this is the transfer station budget, which I'm sure you've probably seen. Each of the individual discrete account lines is listed on the left. They're separated into two functions. And so the first function is administrative, right? So this is your overhead of mostly wages and benefits, but other operating costs, equipment maintenance, well monitoring, all happens in here. And then this separate function down below is all of our direct tipping costs. And so if we were going to structure a target based on Steve Saunders' recommendation, maybe it's this section should be covered by user fees and that section should be covered by the property taxes by the taxpayers.
I think,
You don't all have to agree, but
I think it's reasonable that we're not subsidizing the cost of bags for those who don't use the bag system. I mean,
it's a good point. But a problem with separating it that way is that we buy the bags that people then buy in the overhead costs. So that operating supplies, the budget for 2024 is $55,000. That is almost exclusively trash bags.
That should be.
So,
Wait, which one is trash?
sorry, I know it's, you can reach it better. This 55 right here.
could that be moved down?
Well,
Well, we won't move it down. The Hampshire DRA decides kind of where but yeah, we can do it math wise. Yeah, we can add 55 to 220. I mean, that's some of us can.
But that seems to make sense, what we're proposing here to me. But, was I gonna say, is it consistent with other departments? See, we are only looking at the transfer station, but these guys look across everything. Is that what you do in other areas?
The
So
rec
the rec-
department is,
How much is the rec department?
we fund 3 administrative positions.
They have about a $200,000 budget, and with the revolving fund, they probably do $700,000, including the operating budget a year. So $500,000 in the revolving fund in business a year.
I guess I'm not asking my question properly. We're saying 25% here is about the administrative cost. What is the administrative cost percentage at the rec center?
Yeah, so that
Two steps would be 28%.
28. Okay, so are there?
those numbers are right.
Okay,
So-
that's what I said. So very
Yeah.
comparable.
So sounds like there's a proposal on the table, not trying to move things too fast here, but it sounds like the waste disposal expenses and the operating supplies. Now, Mr. Mead, you had mentioned equipment maintenance. So you'll see we have an equipment maintenance line here.
Yeah.
Probably. So that budget is small, but that budget could be bigger if we
Yeah.
had a roll-off truck.
Right.
Do we want equipment maintenance in our overhead expenses or in our tipping expenses or waste disposal expenses? Building maintenance, monitoring wells, that has to do with the capped landfill monitoring, has to do with the capped landfill. I mean, it could be, and I'm not making this proposal, not in a position to make this proposal, but it could be that it's just the staff costs that are covered by property taxes, hourly wages, earned time buyout, employee benefits, and the balance is covered by user fees. Now, obviously, we're only adding, let me do my quick math here, 18, 21, we're only adding like $22,000 to the tipping fees because we already added the 55 down here conceptually. But the idea is that these numbers could grow based on the operations, and then we wouldn't have to make a change. So we say wages and benefits, property taxes, everything else, user fees. And that's how it is at the transfer station or the recreation department, excuse me.
What if I counter?
I'm trying to understand.
Mhm.
So
Connor, the waste management, costs, are we looking at primarily that $220,000 for the 24?
Right.
Okay, so in 2027, we're looking at that to basically double.
Right.
So
At least.
as a target for increases of fees,
Mhm.
we would want to go and be shooting for that 400,000.
Right, and that's the overlap with the special revenue fund, because I would argue that should be the goal setting for this rate setting for the special revenue fund. I guess before we get there, it might be a good idea to have a decision, a recommendation made about all things equal, think 2030 now, 2024 and 2030. Once we reach an equilibrium, what portion of the operation do we want funded by property taxes and what portion do we want funded by revenue? So you want.
no, I figured out,
Okay.
we'd be actually moving about 70,000 down.
Right, yeah, the 55, yeah,
Okay.
and then above it.
But I have a question, just because of like the conferences and training and dues, fees and training and stuff like that, would that be able to stay up with the employee stuff?
It could, and let's be clear about
I'm-
something.
Yeah,
Let's be perfectly clear about something. The operating budget will all still cover all of the costs because we gross budget and all the revenues collected is general revenue. It is pixie dust to say that the dollar that we bring in for bulky waste disposal covers this dollar of expenses. It is on a gross townwide level. It's money in and money out. The difference is that special revenue fund. That would be something different. That's a separate kitty. A difference is the recreation revolving fund, which is a separate kitty. And so when we're talking conceptually about separating out what we want to be funded by user fees, we're still going to pay for all of those things. We still have to pay for all of those things. And if a year happens where we don't collect enough revenue to meet that, that doesn't make a difference. We just change rates the next year. Yeah. So yeah, could we move the $1,600 up or down? We could.
yeah, okay, I just grouping in my head, you know what I mean, for
Mhm.
things.
Point, counterpoint, consensus.
Can I
Please,
ask a question?
please.
Me?
Yes, Marjorie, sorry.
So where is when we get revenue from whatever recycling category are listed in our expenses, where is that shown? Like if we
Actually-
get anything from cardboard or glass, or are these numbers minus what we get reimbursed for? When
Good.
I know we don't always get reimbursed, but
Yep, it's an excellent question. We don't show revenue here, though. This is just expenses.
Yep.
So I'm going to take you on a journey into the budget binder. So this is the electronic budget binder for everybody in the room and watching at home. So the budget binder is organized by chapter, and the chapter we're going to want to look at here is revenue. And so we can do two things. We can look at our 2023 revenue or projected 2024, maybe 2023. Now, don't get shocked when you see this cumbersome spreadsheet, which may or may not populate. Oh, yeah, you like that? Okay. Everybody tracking so far? So let me zoom in and we will narrow our focus to, so this is our revenue account lines, okay? Every dollar that we bring in fits into one of these accounts. The transfer station is responsible for these revenue categories. And so we have to budget revenue during budget development process and at tax rate setting, right? We just set our tax rate at $16.69. We had to estimate our revenue through the end of 2023 in order to have that rate set. Never going to be perfect. We don't want to underestimate or we don't want to overestimate our revenue. So we usually underestimate a little bit. And that's a source of funding into the unassigned fund balance, which gives us that savings account for good government.
Can you describe what the columns are?
Oh, the columns are different years.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this is a complex spreadsheet that helps us decide how much revenue we anticipate in the last quarter of the year. So we set our revenue projections, our final revenue projections, September 1st for the end of the year. So this uses a bunch of numbers. We'll have another meeting. We'll talk about all of them. But the most important number is our updated, and of course I can't freeze any panes here because this is a PDF and not an Excel file. But I'm going to answer your question, Marjorie. Don't worry. I did not forget why we're here. You were asking about recycling revenue, which is an account line, and it's this account line, which maybe if I make the whole thing blue, when we scroll over, we can see that we have an updated budget of exactly $0 in 2023, because as we all know, it costs us money to recycle. But if we look back at I don't know what numbers these are. This is 2021. We had exactly $690 of revenue in there during that brief moment where we were generating revenue from recycling. And you'll notice the metal, which I didn't list the whole resume of the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee, but another big project was the review of what to do with our metal. And so you'll see our metal revenue here as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so this total, that $4,292,268, that's how much we told the state of New Hampshire we were going to generate in user fee or in revenue, non-property tax revenue for 2023. And then they took our total appropriations, subtracted that out, and came up with another $4 million-ish that we needed to raise from property taxes. That's our tax rate set. Okay. I think we were almost at consensus. Would you like me to propose what it sounds like is on the table? As a target?
Yes.
Okay. Should we go back to that budget so we can look at it at the same time we're talking about it? Okay, the proposal is to set as a revenue target for the purposes of setting user fees or updating user fees, that user fees should cover expenditures on an annual basis for all disposal costs and administrative costs, less wages and benefits, conferences and training, dues and fees. And so
Hey, Connor,
Irving, yes.
I have a question here. The landfill monitoring and the monitoring wells, is it the thought to make those a user fee for those? I don't know that we would call them services. They're sort of requirements for us. Is that a user requirement, or would that be more properly assigned a value as a town responsibility?
It's a good question. I mean, so it doesn't, we're just setting targets. So I guess it doesn't, those dollars we don't have to say that those dollars are the wells, but essentially that burden is taxpayers from long ago because
that's what I was going to say.
So
Those are costs we incurred 30 or more years ago.
Current taxpayers should pay those, not user fees. There's a couple people who feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm seeing
Yeah.
nods.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll pull those out also.
I mean, I just looked at that first column and I just took out the 42,000 for the bags, put it down below. Just that move alone.
Yeah.
And the numbers are pretty round. That means that 30% would be admin and 70% would be the lower part, if you just move the bags down.
Mhm.
So just a little perspective. So it'd be 70% the fees would be covering.
And we were at 65 in 22.
Right.
So we're not talking about dramatic change to the fees to meet that goal. But if we make that recommendation to the select board and they support it, now we have a basis for user fee setting in the future, to Mr. House's point, that, we gotta get through this special revenue fund and new contract and all that.
But that doesn't put anybody into the special fund, right?
Are we ready to, do we want to take a quick vote? Is everybody like that conceptual? Everybody understands it?
Yeah.
Okay, those in favor of recommending to the select board a revenue target for transfer station fees set at what we talked about.
65%.
Well, no, we're not talking about percentage though, because
Yeah,
we're
we're gonna
talking
add
about a
it.
portion of
Okay.
these ones.
Yeah.
It's about 70.
Those items. Roughly.
Those items that don't include monitoring wells, wages and benefits, conferences, and training, dues.
Can
and
you
fees.
highlight up there the ones we are gonna do?
I know. I'll just pull up the actual spreadsheet because I'm on the PDF to make it easy to put on the website,
We need to immortalize some, right? So 10 years when we're coming back to do a budget review.
Yeah, every year, Aaron and I are gonna come back and watch this video recording too. Okay, now what did they say? No, I'm just kidding. We'll get it put up in a nice pretty memo to the select board and that will be our budget setting. Okay, you
Want me to take notes?
Okay, you all asked for this. I'm just telling you that you asked for this. We are taking an even deeper dive into the operating budget.
Yeah.
I know how we start.
Okay. So this is the Excel file behind all of the budgeting. And we're gonna go into Aaron's budget, which shows that same thing. This is where that PDF is generated from. But what we're going to do is do you want me to highlight the cells that are the accounts are, or highlight the ones that aren't? Maybe we'll just do both of them in different colors. So we're talking these. I mean, mileage and expenses, if we're doing employee costs, mileages and expenses would be in that category too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so it's just building maintenance, equipment rental, and operating supplies. So,
Aren't I losing them at some point?
yeah, probably. Yeah, maybe it can be in there for now. Okay, so taxes. Silly conditional formatting. Oops. Okay, you know what, I'm gonna do it here. I'm gonna remove the conditional form. And then we'll do it this way. Landfill monitoring wells, conferences and training modules, expenses. Okay, taxes are bad. User fees are good. Okay.
It's like Christmas.
Good.
Orange and brown for Thanksgiving.
I was gonna say, that's a little-
Okay,
You
and
can't carry those colors.
You could do the math quick.
I know,
You can't write.
We get,
yeah. But what I'm gonna do is I will say,
No,
so we'll do down here. We're gonna pretty this up, but just for the sake of the conversation. So we're gonna say taxes, user fees, and this is gonna be 2024. And we're gonna take taxes. It's gonna be those ones. And user fees. We're gonna say.
304.75.
So we're looking at, for 2024, the target of revenue would be 72.68% of the total operating budget expenditures for the transfer station. And so what we would use that for in a vacuum, if we weren't talking about a special revenue fund, is when as we approach the end of the year, probably sometime in mid-December, we would look at our revenue for 2023 and see how we're tracking. And I'll tell you that I think we're tracking pretty strong on a revenue side. I think we're tracking to exceed 65% this year. I think I looked at it in real numbers. We were 68% of budgeted expenditures, and budgeted expenditures usually come in less. Revenue projections usually come in more. Well, we don't need to look at that. We'll go down that rabbit hole another time. Everybody's comfortable with that? Red, green?
Yeah, just one question. If we have, from year to year, obviously, at the end of the year, you look at the real numbers.
Right.
And if there's a dramatic difference, I mean, I don't think it'd be good if every single year we change the user fees.
Right.
I mean, that's just so there's gotta be some kind of plus or minus built into this.
Yeah, and I think in practice, how I would see that working is that in December, Aaron and I crunch numbers and bring those updates back to the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee to look at and dig into those numbers a little bit to say, okay, is there anything different here? It looks like we're trending with maybe decreased utilization, which decreases our revenue for what we're using to meet those. And so is it reasonable to increase fees to meet that? Obviously, we're painting with a broad brushstroke already because we're talking about a year's worth of data. So my favorite data anomaly is the transfer station. The two busiest months are January and December. We have extra hours all summer, but the most tonnage we get at that facility is January and December. And so with the help of you all voters, this March, we will decide to have the facility open the same hours year round, and then we just don't.
So I just have, something to add for that, because I know that there are things that we can do on our part to, increase what we're doing, but minimizing like the cost for us. And this was kind of like a side note at some point to talk about, like, we can do, instead of our electronics company taking our ACs and refrigerators, we can do an on-site Freon removal for half the price. So something like that needs to be discussed at some point.
And that would have impacts.
Yes.
On the balance.
So, there's things that we can do, but I mean, obviously, right now, we don't have storage. Like NRA has through Harding, our metal vendor, instead of us just throwing the ACs in there, the refrigerators could go into metal. We could separate ACs, have the Freon drain, and then they take them on pallets. But again, this requires storage that we don't really have right now. An easy fix, we could buy a container. But so we have different options that Lou and I have discussed about what we could do to minimize some of the cost that is associated with this.
Okay, ready for a vote?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you support it. Raise your hand if you don't support it. Unanimous. Select board's gonna love that. Marjorie and Bill, we couldn't see your hands go up or down, but speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'm in, I approve.
Fantastic.
I'm in too. I just don't know. Okay. Me through.
That unanimous, remains unanimous. Okay. So now we're gonna throw all that out the window because we're gonna talk about maybe jacking prices up even higher. So maybe I will go back to share that email. Do you all feel like from the email and our brief discussion so far, do you need more background or details about what a special revenue fund is or how it might work? No, that's fantastic.
The only objection I have is that if you take revenue out of offsetting taxes, it is going to affect taxes. And again, I support what you're suggesting. I'm just trying to say, to be absolutely blunt, that anytime you take revenue and dedicate it to some specific thing, it's not going against taxes, it's going against a specific objective.
And so let's dig into that really quick, because what I recommended to the select board and would recommend to all of you here is that we maintain a level of revenue in the general fund each year so that there isn't a decrease in funding to the general fund. So we will be increasing fees gradually over few years, and the extra revenue that we're collecting from the additional fees goes into the special revenue fund, but the general fund keeps the same level of revenue so that we're not.
What that means, the extra revenue does not go to the general.
Right, right.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
No,
And I
it's a
think
point
anything
well
else
made.
is gobbledygook to try to say, oh, no, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes to a special fund, does not go to offset taxes.
But wouldn't that help taxes in the years that we need the special money?
Yeah, that's.
I'm in agreement with that. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
don't like the presentation that it doesn't reduce revenue. It does.
Yeah, it diverts the revenue. I guess to the point that the goal that we just talked about was 72% funded through user fees.
Yep.
We can maintain that goal in the general fund as revenue and increase fees and set it aside. And so we can maintain that commitment. To your point that we're bringing in more money, but it's not offsetting the tax rate is 100% accurate. And that's
why I don't like that presentation that,
Yeah.
oh, no, it doesn't affect taxes at all. It does because the extra revenue does not help.
Okay.
It goes to a special cause, which I think is a worthy cause. I'm not negating anything like
So,
that.
but it's an excellent point because we all need to understand this really well and brainstorm, if we support it, how to talk about it so that residents understand it and can make an informed decision, because residents will ultimately be deciding if a special revenue fund is established. And so it's an excellent point that it shouldn't be discussed as this doesn't have impact on taxes, but we're increasing fees and setting the increased fees aside. It isn't, would you feel comfortable that it isn't anticipated to increase the tax burden if we maintain a level of funding?
Well, it will. If we reduce revenue, we're going to increase taxes. But I agree with the special revenue fund.
Mhm.
I totally agree with that.
Mhm.
I just don't like the presentation of it.
Of the, as it relates to the tax rate.
So you're trying to
I think it's
even things out.
deferring,
Right, right.
a future call.
Please, Lou.
Just a quick question. When you say raising or increasing fees
Mhm.
at the station, are you referring to the bulk material?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Because if we were in a fully digital operation, right, and everything was easy, that, okay, that has this cost and there's no subjectivity, then we could easily say, increase the fees across the board every year 15% or 20%. But when we look at our user fee schedule, it's not that easy because we want round numbers and we want, it isn't just that simple. And so what I would argue the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee would need to do is, if we said, okay, we want to increase the fees 20% in starting January 1st of 2024. This committee, part of this committee, look at that fee structure with a tremendous amount of input from you, hopefully, and say, how can we target a 20% increase? Bag fees, that's easy. Throw 20% on that.
And that's a situation that could be unfavorable for those of us that are presenting the new prices.
Right.
And we're gonna need, in order to do that, some hard numbers.
You're gonna need a good elevator speech is what you need. That's what.
Right.
That's the
You know,
elevator
it's
speech.
a point well taken, and it shouldn't be taken lightly at this group or with the select board or with the voters when they ultimately decide. Because let's be clear, what we're really talking about is doubling the fees over 4 years or 3 years instead of 1. And it's a pay me now or pay me later. We know the fees are going to go up because we have a proposal from Waste Management showing what they want our fees to be. And we're going to have to pay that much more. And if we all agree that it's better to incrementally increase those so residents can prepare for it, then we have to also be okay telling residents, this is better for you than you coming in tomorrow in 3 years and the fees being doubled.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that you can plan. No, yeah, I didn't think that you disagreed, but to Peter's point, to your point, we need to brainstorm messaging, talking points and all the rest of it like that.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's easy for this committee and the select board especially to say this, people who take the heat for this. People are
Right.
actually there. They're the ones that say, because as we point out, when we raised the bag fees, all the select board got was, oh, why have you waited so long? This is a good deal. We've got a somewhat different word,
Right.
and probably not quite so pleasant.
It wasn't as unpleasant as we expect.
Mhm.
We still have people coming in. When did you raise? Almost a year ago.
Right.
I guess my thing is, philosophically, we're paying as you go. Now we're saying you're paying for something you might not even live here in 4 years. You know,
Right.
so it's kind of unfair. It's not in line with the way we structured our fees.
It's an excellent point.
You know, and that's the biggest thing, you know, like I say, people move in and out of town, people pass away. I mean, you're paying for something.
It is comparable to what we do for all of our capital.
Right.
We have fire trucks, you know,
I know,
I'm gonna
but
buy a
don't
new
you-
fire truck, but I'm putting money aside as part of the taxes
30
for a new
years.
fire truck. I mean, be here when they need that.
I know, well, don't they usually, and I don't follow the budget as well as I should. I mean, a lot of times there's a bond, so you pay for it over the
No,
years, but
no.
So
never.
we do an opposite model,
Yeah, yeah.
and that is common in
Yeah.
other communities. And the philosophical argument is the exact one that you made.
Yeah.
The users of the services should be paying for it. Even if you pay more in total dollar amount by bonding and paying interest, you're better, you know, we like the philosophical argument. In Barrington, the strong tradition that is continued today is anytime we can, we save for big expenditures and then use cash on hand to buy them.
I know, but the difference I look at that's infrastructure. This is
Mhm.
an actual
But-
fee at the time.
It is
Right now, they're not charging us that
But in
much.
the context of a bond,
We pay more.
we could have a bond next year and people who move out of town or die basically are paying for it until their property changes.
Yeah, but like I say, it's sort of, I don't look at buying things like trucks and things the same way I look at
Mhm.
actual user fees.
Yeah.
I'm paying to throw away a bag of trash.
That is a
Current
strong
price.
counterpoint to this approach.
I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying I'm on board
What
with
are we
that.
thinking times 3 or times 4 in 40?
Can I speak to this? In
one
utilities, it is common to raise rates consistently to avoid spikes. Because I know I went through a period where our agency chose not to raise rates. And then water and wastewater, they were hit with 20% increase. So
Current fees for all the bulk and for the bags do not cover the entire cost of the transfer station and recycling center at this point, right?
Yeah.
You have to define that a
Yes,
little
sir.
bit better. That's what we were just talking about. The tipping fees. When you look at expenditures, not budget, it's a little bit over 100% for 2022. And so our user fees are paying our tipping fees. But a fraction of the overall budget for the transfer
But
station.
it's not covering the total.
No, right now it's 2022 is 65%. We just talked about a conceptual 72%.
So if we're going and saying that we only want to go and cover the non-administrative stuff,
Mhm.
then if we go and we increase fees on an incremental basis in that money would still be less than the total cost, correct?
No, probably not. In 2 years' time, if we were really targeting incremental increases to a presumed doubling of fees, in 2025, we would probably be collecting more total revenue, the part that goes to the general fund and the part that goes to special revenue fund, in excess of 100% of the operating costs of the transfer station.
No, I can see what the problem is.
Okay.
I'm-
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, one point I wanted to make about increasing the fees and making the town population aware of it. I know we've got a website, Facebook thing, this, that, and the other thing, but I've noticed that 90% of the people in Barrington don't read.
He didn't say can't read. He didn't say can't.
That was
read.
great for them, yeah.
I'm not trying to be a smart aleck.
Oh, yeah.
It's, we have signs darn near everywhere. And people don't see them because they're always there. And they walk right by them. I pick out ceramic stuff, light bulbs, windshields from the glass. Okay?
Yeah.
Ceramics.
It's fragile like glass. No, that is not, it's not good enough.
It breaks when you throw it in.
But that's the quickest example I can use.
Oh, yeah.
There's others, but. So that's something to be aware of on how the town is going to be addressing this to the users.
Mhm. Right. And I think, keeping the rate structure the same, unless there's reason for changes, although I think the update did a pretty reasonable job of improving it from where it was. But using the same rate structure and simply creating a template for, like I said, maybe the target is a 20% increase in fees. And we go through and, okay, so an upholstered chair, easy, $12. Love seat is also easy. That's $18, right? What's one would be difficult? They're all pretty easy, right? So fiberglass
You
tanks,
get down to 8.
we're probably not going to make it $9.60, right? That would be ridiculous. It's $10, it's $9, whatever. But create those increased fees. And I'm talking a year's time, and changing them every year is annoying. The question for this group is that less annoying than doubling the fees in 1 year's time for both the operating budget, because we know a portion is covered by property taxes, and for users who will be picking up 72% of that increased cost.
So how much you gonna increase each year?
That's topic for discussion here. So the way I see it, if we head down this path, we can start no sooner than March 13th. Because voters have to establish a special revenue fund. And voters establish a special revenue fund, we have ready to implement the 13th of March, updated user fees for 2024. And then we would go calendar year, update them again, January 1st, 2025, update them again, January 1st, 2026. And anything extra is helpful for that off ramp from the current contract onto the new contract. But if the goal is raising money, then we might change the rates at one rate. If the goal is getting closer to the anticipated costs, we might change them at a higher rate, even maybe. And so,
What do you anticipate the objective is, though? Repeat that for me.
I don't know. I think it's a shared objective between one, gradually increasing the rates so that they're not a huge spike, although 20% is huge. I mean, a 20% increase in user fees is big, but I think we need like 3 consecutive 20% increases in user fees to get us close to where we need to be in 2027. So I think that's one goal, gradual increase in user fees. Second goal, generating revenue into the special revenue fund that gives us options in 2027, either to buy down the increase in the property taxes and or user fees, or explore something crazy like buying a Warlock truck. Or something.
So is the idea that the revenue collected over the 72% goes into that special?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, and we could do that. We could do that in 2 ways, probably. But I think the cleanest way would be to have residents in the warrant article establish a minimum threshold of revenue to be collected in the general fund. And then everything beyond that goes into the special revenue fund. And so the first $225,000 collected in revenue in the year goes into the general fund. So that is always going to be the first. We're not missing our revenue targets because we're putting money aside in special revenue. Land use change tax is a penalty that people pay for taking land out of current use values. It's 10% of the assessed value of the property. In Barrington, 75% of that revenue goes into the conservation fund and 25% goes into the general fund. That's revenue. But that happens on each payment. As it comes in, it's split. I would say the special revenue fund, the general fund should be made whole first, and then anything in excess of that would go into special revenue fund. So January to September, it's going into the general fund. October to December, special revenue fund.
I do have a suggestion to kind of ease the pain that we will be receiving.
Right.
Is with anything such as tax bills that go out from the town, include the new rate up
Excellent.
there. It will ease the brunt of what we're gonna receive.
So let's look at something really quick, because we were talking about how much do we want to increase it? Call me crazy, but
Okay.
we could, it was that hard to convince you to call me crazy, huh? I would say that it's possible to balance this objective of increased revenue and all the rest on trash bag prices. Maybe trash bag prices is the only number that we're really changing every year, and all the other numbers stay the same or close to the same. I think we have to watch out for like contractor bags, because if the trash bag prices get too high, then people say, oh, it's cheaper to put in a contractor bag and throw it out that way. Even though it says no.
It's the other way
people
right
can't
now.
read. No, people
It's
don't.
the other way right now. It's cheaper to put it in a trash bag
Yeah.
than it is to pay the $5 a bag.
Yeah.
Contractor fee.
And that's how it should be.
We're backwards.
No, we're frontwards.
Now,
If the green bags cost more, we're frontwards.
No, the green bags cost less.
No, if the green bags cost less, we're frontwards. What are you saying?
My suggestion would be go up on green bags, you go up on contractor bags, because of just how some of the stuff has been coming over.
So maybe we balance it on just two revenue streams. So we're not
Because if-
changing the whole rates every
because if
January. What do you think
we-
about that?
If we do what we can do with the Freon and still collect what we're doing because we are gonna be handling it more, you've cut those prices in half on what we are paying for.
So as a
You know what
proportion,
I mean? So,
We have that big a percentage.
It's $17 a unit, right?
well, we get charged 15.
Okay.
So then we'd be
That's
getting charged $7.50. But if we do a certain thing, like Lou had pointed out, we're still handling it,
Yeah.
but keep the prices the same for that. So now you've cut the prices in half and you're
Right.
still.
and I think all of
And
that,
revenue, yeah, and revenue on top of that.
all of
for
that
metal.
progress can continue and should continue. And that on an annual basis would advise how much we change the rates, because we're going to be looking at revenue and looking at expenditures. But trash bags, for example, right? 162, so that's 172, 232. So 160 over 232 is what? Is that 75%?
Oh, 232?
Where's my human calculator?
it's 71.4.
Yeah, it's right.
Okay, so thank you. Did you do that in your head? No, you didn't. know that.
No,
Okay.
don't trust me.
Okay, but it's right around there. So the lion's share, I thought he had a phone or something. The lion's share of our revenue comes from trash bag fees. And so we could simply use that revenue stream as the basis for increasing those fees and getting them up. I mean, that's obviously their biggest expense with municipal solid waste, our biggest revenue stream. Or we could do that with contractor bags, so we don't end up with an issue.
So basically, you're saying each year would be raising the cost of bags by 20%.
That's
what it
To a
boils
whole-
down
to a
to,
whole
pretty
number.
much. Unless
Yes.
there's one stream we don't pay for at all, which actually costs money, which is actually the recycling.
right.
I mean, you could come up with a new stream, and we don't want to drive people away from recycling, however.
Yeah, and I know the transfer station talks about that continuously and the, what is it, old corrugated cardboard OCC, right? That progress can still continue. If that's a good idea, that can still be a good idea if we do this, and it might change how we change rates or something. But yeah, so we've talked about a few important things. One, resident impact of increasing the rates. Two, employee user, frontline employee impact of raising the rates in this kind of complex idea of, hey, I just want to pay to throw out this trash bag right now, not how much it's going to cost me to pay out, throw out a trash bag in 3 years. We talked about user fees and how much of them to adjust. What's the general sense about establishing a special, asking residents to establish a general revenue fund?
I'm in favor.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like we probably won't have complete consensus on the details. I feel like to Mr. Mead's point, I feel like I need to sharpen my pencil a little bit to make a more in-depth recommendation on annual increases to reach a good target in 2027. I've talked conceptually about 15 or 20%. It could be that that's not enough. It could be that still leaves us with a big step in 2027. So I can sharpen my pencil on that. And I think we have some time to develop exactly what that plan looks like. The big question is whether we want to establish a special revenue fund.
I think the detail I'd like to see is if we went up 20% a year, and we're reserving 200,000 for the general fund, how much money is there left for this special revenue fund, and is it sufficient?
Yeah, what would you really even be able to do with it?
Precisely.
Cumulatively.
Yes, exactly.
And a reality that we need to prepare for.
I think we're gonna get killed in 2027, so
I know.
I'm certainly in favor of putting money aside for that event.
So I have to admit that I share Scott Shepard's speculation about CMA's analysis of users of the transfer station. I'd love to know. I'm anxious for Aaron to call them and ask them, how does the accounts do that? But a reality that we have to prepare for is increasing fees makes it that much more appealing to pay for a private trash hauler. And increasing fees could decrease utilization. Now, I think Mr. Lindsay said earlier that we don't want to disincentivize that. I don't know if I fundamentally agree. I mean, you can have that point, right? Maybe we want people to do that opposed to doing other things. But a reality of decreased utilization is decreased revenue. So to that point, if we increase fees and it results in decreased utilization, it also results in decreased fees.
Revenue.
Tipping fees.
Revenue. I'll use a different word. Good idea. Yeah.
But it reduces tipping fees too.
Right. And then that should be proportional because of how we set our revenue targets. But that still results in fewer real dollars in the special revenue fund to do something with in 2027. So in 2026, we could, our utilization could be cut in half. And the amount going to the special revenue fund could end up being useless because it's a fraction of what we would actually need.
Right.
Dan, I think you had something.
That was the point.
And then won't
Increase utilization, decrease cost.
And then won't that make it harder to cover the 72%? Because the administrative costs
Are
fixed or going up and the
Precisely.
revenue's going down, so it's gonna be harder to hit that 70. So that, at that point, we have to revisit that.
Right. There's a lot of moving
But
parts.
it sounds like we'd be, though, losing revenue overall because we're overcharging for the bags. Our bag prices were basically set somewhat to what we paid. Now we're gonna go up 20%.
Some people, how can I use that term loosely? Some people are covering the cost of their disposal. Others are, still putting,
Overfill.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I guess it would definitely, if your perspective is that the bag prices should cover the cost to dispose what's inside that bag, then yes, this model throws that out the window. I had said before when we raised bag prices that because of the whole recycling situation, bag prices should cover tipping fees for recycling and MSW. Because we need a revenue stream to associate with recycling, and so that's the closest revenue stream. I think what the proposal would be here is we're not paying as close attention to the discrete tipping fees and direct revenue stream. But we're looking at the facility as a whole and the future and saying, where can we generate additional revenue to be prepared for 2027? I said about the trash bags, doing it all there because I just think that's easy.
Yeah, it's the easiest way, but
I think there could be some fine tuning throughout, but I mean, like, not going through, obviously, that would be the easiest thing instead of every
Every
year
single-
going through every line item
Yeah,
to
definitely.
do that. Yeah.
Okay. So Dan, as far as a recommendation to the select board, do you think we need to put any more meat on the bone at this point?
I think we're gonna have the same discussion at the select board we just had here. But I don't think you need to add much more to that.
Mhm.
That's, I think, again, the select board's gonna have the same discussion we've had here.
And the benefit of having it here first selfishly is that we'll put that in the minutes, and that's gonna make the conversation with the select board that much more efficient. Because I'll tell you something that the select board appreciates above most all things is the appointed citizen volunteers that kind of pre-review a lot of what they see, right? In the 5 years that I've been here, the select board has not once made a change to the operating budget other than what was recommended by the budget committee. Because they know that the budget committee is looking through every single line and they appreciate that work and they recognize that they go. I don't say this with as much confidence, but I'm pretty sure that the select board has supported every recommendation that's come out of the transfer station recycling center review committee. This committee works on it. They say, hey, this is what we'd like to see, make that recommendation, they go for it. So it makes it tremendously more efficient at the select board level, having these deliberations and discussion now, packaging it up with all of the input to the select board. So I appreciate that. I know that you too. So you're thinking no more meat on the bone. I'll sharpen my pencil. Do
All of those details, like to do everything, you know, just like when the budget committee comes. Same with this issue.
right. And is the transfer station recycling center review committee comfortable with the idea that both for the changing fees to meet a revenue target, which will kind of be on hold if we do the special revenue fund, but also reviewing the fee schedule and updating fees for the special revenue fund model, being kind of the group that sits down and looks at that list on an annual basis, you know, probably in December-ish.
that's what we get paid for.
I know. Yeah. A big
We'll double your
bucks.
salary.
Yeah. Have you filed for your appointed official tax credit?
Yeah.
I think for a split second, he's like, oh.
What?
Yeah.
I think a selling point on any increase would be to look at it, especially if it's bag price. To look at it as a percent change over the, 36 years
Yeah.
that it's existed. And it's such an infinitesimal, small amount that I'm sure people will complain, but maybe not rationally.
Right, well, didn't complain rationally last.
Yeah, but now
Well,
it's
that's what I'm
happening
saying.
again.
Some people are gonna
in a
complain
shorter
about it.
Frame.
But seriously, if you look at it over a 36-year history, it really is infinitesimal.
They were expecting another 36 years though.
Indeed, that's true.
That's
Absolutely.
And maybe
Right.
if Waste Management gets their 60-acre expansion,
Yeah.
they'll just drop their rates through the floor and say.
Oh, sure.
Was it-
I'm counting on that.
Yeah.
Actually, were those the numbers that were proposed? Was that without the expansion moving forward?
Right.
So that actually could,
No, they're,
No,
no,
they're
not
still
gonna-
charged.
don't even dream it.
The problem is the Interstate Commerce Act, and this is why Massachusetts doesn't want landfills and has set regulations in support of that, right? And I don't think New Hampshire wants landfills either, but we have landfills that I don't want to say we can't do anything about. Did they end up permitting that one up north, that new one that the Cadella one?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's a tough deal. And so we're getting all these, I hear mattresses is the big thing for Massachusetts because
There's
it's
a ban.
impossible to, yeah, you
They're
can't
coming
get rid of
here.
mattress people say get rid of it every 8 years. Massachusetts says keep it forever.
But there's a right way that you can do it.
Yeah, you can actually forbid. State can.
Right.
Yeah. Say we won't.
Cause I have asked every year about this, about our mattresses, and I'm like, is there an issue? But, you know, we've had a couple of residents who have recycled them properly. They've broken it down to where the wire springs go into metal, and then they just have a ball of, you know what I mean? Yeah.
The big problem is entities like Rochester, who gets their trash for free. And I've been to many meetings trying to oppose waste management expansion because I'm in a butter. So I get
That's the
invited.
interest, yeah.
And Rochester is always there saying, oh, they're no problem at all. Well, of course, they get tremendous economic benefit from that landfill. And I think it's a political pressure that is never going to oppose waste management. And Barrington is nothing compared to Rochester. And so we're stuck. We're just sunk. I mean, there's nothing we're going to do to oppose it. And so on occasion, I've told DES that you guys just will approve anything, which I think is true.
A silver lining to that is as long as waste management is open, our fees will be dramatically lower than any alternative.
We don't know that.
What,
No.
you don't think? You don't think putting on a train to Ohio is?
I think they're going to stick it to us.
Yeah, but that's the point, is that we heard this Wednesday, that if they close all of our New Hampshire, when they run out, then the next closest place is Ohio.
And I think part of their, let's say, animosity is going to be because the board didn't agree to this ridiculous proposal they made. And they're really going to stick it to us.
Hey, silver lining,
That's my anticipation.
another silver lining, because I'm that kind of guy.
Right.
Our forefathers in Barrington, and you're probably on the group, had the foresight to join the Lamprey Regional Waste Cooperative.
And we're still paying dues, yes.
Hey, listen, I will tell you why still paying those dues may be very much in our favor. Lamprey Regional Cooperative recently negotiated was it a 10-year, 6-year?
I don't think it was 10-year.
A multi-year, beyond 2027, tipping fee rate for members of the Lamprey Regional Cooperative. So what's going to happen in 2027 is we're going to, prior to 2027, truth be told, we're going to negotiate with Waste Management directly to see what we can get from tipping fees. If we can't get better than what they offer, we can use the Lamprey Regional Cooperative rates. The caveat is we still have to haul. The Lamprey Regional Cooperative doesn't cover hauling. It's just tipping fees. And so that's where the special revenue fund and our own roll-off truck might be more attractive, because if we call up Waste Management and say, we want to pay the tipping fees through Lamprey Regional Cooperative, but we want to have a separate contract directly with you for our hauling, guess what? Our hauling is going to be
Ridiculous. Now, that back in the day, when I was on the board, we used to, Lamprey used to be the hauler with their own truck. And so I guess that's no longer the case.
I think that they still have a truck, but for what we have hauled, we sometimes can have 6 cans hauled on a Monday. And I think that would put undue.
Yeah, I don't think they could handle.
Yeah, they can't handle us.
But
we might contract.
They used to have their own truck.
Yeah.
We might contract it with somebody, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I have to ask Mark what you can do, what else you can do with a roll-off truck. I guess maybe just pick up other roll-on and contracts, but
Intergovernmental agreement with somebody else to do.
Precisely. And so it could be something, you know, like I mentioned, Durham, they do their own hauling, but they have their own trucks. They don't haul compactor cans like we have.
No,
They
they
have.
have compactor trucks
Yeah.
that they haul.
Right.
Yeah.
Lee,
Has their own roll off.
they have their own roll-off.
Because that's where we,
Just contract services with Lee.
Yeah, see, I've never seen that on the road.
yeah.
They don't drive a 125 people.
I mean, they used to be in the same deal as Barrington where the Lamprey would pick them up and pick us up and.
I don't think that they separate out a lot, so they don't have a ton leaving.
A ton literally.
Well, not,
Yeah, do that, 2005 pounds?
yeah. I don't know how much material they haul out. So, and when they do,
Yeah, they are very efficient in separating single source.
they have a lot
separating
of
their
space
stuff.
to
Yeah.
be able to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Okay, by a vote of the combined joint meeting, the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee and Budget Committee, support for establishing a special revenue fund. All those in favor?
I would like to see some numbers, but I support the concept.
All those opposed? Okay, another unanimous. Except I can't see Marjorie. Well,
I'm good.
all right, I love it. Another unanimous
Thank
recommendation.
you.
This has been really helpful for me. I think the homework for everybody is going to be continue to think about it and think about how we can explain to residents what we're really doing here. You know, I'm thinking it'd probably be worth our effort to put together half sheets or full sheets that kind of show, you know, a graph that shows where we anticipate rates being in 2027 and our path to get there. Once I sharpen my pencil and, you know, we set some targets there. But we not only are going to need, we can think it's a great idea, we're going to need voter support in March to establish it. And voters are going to have to understand it enough to vote on it. And then we're going to need continued voter support especially for the employees of the transfer station on the front line.
If you're gonna use a graph, may I suggest you do your best not to make it a 45-degree?
Noted, okay.
Because no, really, the visual thing,
X and Y axis.
you know,
So I'll
that,
just extend, we'll print it on 11 by 17, so.
yeah.
Figures lie, liars figure.
Yeah.
But there's also a broader discussion that needs to be had about the budget as a whole. So this is just one piece of it. So
Right.
this will be part of it. I think there'll be a lot of reactions overall that you will feel.
But I also think it's a really good opportunity for us to educate people that they can control some of those escalating costs by modifying their behavior.
Precisely.
And so I think it's, that's the upside here.
You have a captive audience. Somebody says, can you believe trash bags went up 20%? Yes. Can I give you some tips for reducing your waste? Did you know that on average, 50% of MSW is compostable? Did you know that we will maybe implement a program where you can get at cost composting bins for at-home composting? You know, I love that point. Yeah, really flip that and have those talking points available.
But does that actually get flipped into the whole discussion of what the transfer station becomes? Because you got to start to prepare for that, right?
Right.
So
What do you anticipate it becoming?
I don't know, we've talked about updating the transfer station, right? So it seems like we need to have some of those ideas flushed out. So it goes into the design. Is that the process? Am I right about that?
And I think once we have, and you may not know this, so I'll slow down when I say it.
Thank you.
I'm trying to make sure I don't sound rude when I say this, because that's not my intent. But as the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee knows, and you may not, the CNA engineers is doing a evaluation. And they already do the feasibility study. This is called feasibility study too? How long are we feasing? We need to.
So we can't feed anymore.
We're in the ability stage.
Yeah, we need to get to ability.
So, they had just done a brief overall assessment of the
A
facility.
pre-feasibility study.
And now-
This is how engineers are
I know.
driving
get it.
Mercedes.
And now we're gonna have an A, B, and C option
Okay.
of what the facility could look like.
And evaluation is
Well
being
worth it.
performed, in progress, due back early next year.
That's fine.
And I think that will help advise some of that decision making, and the timing will be really favorable to be having those conversations about the future of the facility. We're gonna choose ABC.
So it's basically a low, medium, and high price point.
Right.
For high being a brand new facility, so.
But that's why we have to grow our numbers. People are not gonna go for this if 20% of the people in town are using it. That's why I think we have to get more, not less people into the transfer station. They're not gonna vote for something that 20% of the people use.
It's a good point.
That makes
It's a good point. So I think this is probably a broader topic of conversation for the Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee relative to utilization, whether or not it makes sense to set a goal for increasing utilization or not. I don't know that that's a given. You make a good point. But I think that warrants further discussion. Because I think that will advise the policy recommendations that the committee makes, right? If you have as an overarching goal to increase utilization of the facility, then you might make some decisions that you wouldn't if you were purely revenue driven or cost driven, or, you know, other goals.
I think it's the budget committee and the transfer station committee kind of move through this process. I think this is a tremendous venue, and I recommend that we do this again. Not right away, but after we've formulated some thought on what we've discussed tonight. I think it would be very valuable to meet again, and I think this is a great venue for us to have this discussion.
I do have like one question, just make it more like, are we looking for 2024 for the special revenue or, okay, just so that everybody knows the time.
Yeah, and that's the timeline, and new fees would be set to go into effect March 13th.
Yep.
Well, ooh, this would be interesting.
Oh.
March, I would say March 14th, but that's only if the budget passes with increased, but we probably wouldn't start the permanent hours until April, maybe, you know?
Yeah,
February,
then,
April,
then
please.
March 14th would become the Ides of March.
So
Close enough,
should
Lou.
we-
Close enough.
We would
Should we-
still look at the cost just to cover the existing costs, right? So we still have to,
Later this
Yeah,
month,
so,
later next month.
So could we? So like, all right, say it passes in March that we get the additional hours.
Mhm.
Would that start the first week of April?
Probably makes the most sense.
Okay.
I mean, you gotta tell an employee on a Tuesday that you gotta work Thursday. I would.
Well, I'm just saying, because so maybe we just say April 1st, which is no April Fools, but then, you know, do then just do everything at once? New user fees, new times?
Probably.
So we
Yeah.
can move that, but we'll have everything.
I mean, the sad reality is it won't be perfect, especially because and we ran into this the last time, when we raised, it will be much more broadly broadcast ahead of time. The trash bag fees are going up. And any person with their head screwed on and some expendable money is gonna go
Yeah,
run on
and
trash
that
bags.
was,
We strategized before when we thought that was going to happen, some strategies that we could implement. It turns out we just implemented it immediately, and so it wasn't a big deal. But we could set between January and March, we could set limits on the number of bags that people can buy per trip. Yes, they can get around it, but at least to disincentivize people coming in, which is terrible for somebody like me because I always go and just buy like 10 rolls of bags at a time because I don't want to bring cash to the transfer station every time and just do it once. So I made sure not to do that when the fees went up last time. So everybody thought that I was playing insider information, you know?
I want to see the instant replay.
Yeah.
but we do have several people who buy a bunch of rolls, you know, so they aren't coming. Yeah, there's a couple that will buy 10, there's 5, there's, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do much about the outside.
No,
At the grocery.
No, other than.
except that they run out and we
Yeah.
don't have a supply to give them, and now their customers are coming. And so we could encourage them to set limits also. But we have time to talk about those strategies, and I don't think we need all of us here to do that. But it definitely won't be perfect.
For sure.
Can I get a couple boxes of your business cards?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Hey, listen, I tell anybody that knows me personally knows that all I really love to do is talk, and I get to tell them, listen, I get paid to talk to people all the time. If it's, you know, the good conversations and the bad conversations, I don't mind. I like talking.
It's one thing.
I'll give the deaths of that, Lou.
Does he listen?
Do you think I listen?
Huh?
At the beginning, you said 48% comes from, of the revenues, of the town expenditures come from taxes.
Right.
I just always assumed it was much higher than that.
I know, isn't that surprising?
Yeah.
It's,
So 52 comes from
Oh.
fees for,
Did-
I know there's a myriad of things.
did you know that there's a slide in the, no.
Oh, yeah.
There we go, Bob. Get ready.
No, we don't need it. I'm just amazed.
Hey,
at
the
all that.
more you know.
Lay it on her.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed.
But this is the why. This is telling a why.
So this is just a simple pie chart, if it loads, that shows those.
Oh, the
Yeah, so this is,
Registration fees.
this is our annual revenue. So 48% is property tax, 27 vehicle registration, 12% state. That's been the biggest variable in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Because under Governor Sununu's leadership, the rooms and meals tax distribution increased dramatically. It has almost doubled since I was first started Barrington 5 years ago. And so that has increased from like 8% to 12% of our revenue. Fees for service, that's going to be transfer station, ambulance, building permit fees.
Oh, I was gonna say, what is fees for service? That is the transfer.
Transfer station is included in here.
I need to.
And what's, so 48, wow, I just would have guessed property taxes would have been much higher.
Right. And so there's a, let me see if it's under the tax section. Let me go to,
Motor vehicles, fundamentally, I would guess a good average about 100,000.
Really?
Yeah.
so we do this every year to estimate the tax rate impact of what voters are going to vote on. Kind of a complicated table, but just going through it quickly at the top, this is what, if voters approved all of this funding, this is war service credits, so that's different kind of thing. But down here, this subtracts out what we project for revenue from all those other areas outside of property taxes. And then that leaves the balance of what needs to be raised by property taxes. And then that is almost simply divided by the total assessed value of the town, multiplied by 1,000 and gives the tax rate. And so if I actually just made a frequently asked question, because of course everybody getting their tax bills and what happened to my values, what happened to the tax rate, where's all these details?
Bringing up the hook.
Yeah. So I put together a few frequently asked questions. And is it in this one?
Is there a comparison of other towns?
Oh, not really.
Yes.
Because I actually talked to somebody today and told them our tax rates are much lower than surrounding towns. I'm
Right.
like, oh, okay.
Right. And it's tough because in order to truly compare town to town, you should compare the tax rate and the equalized ratio, because not our assessed values are now close to 100% of the fair market value of the real estate market. Like last year, Barrington was 80%. And so if you try to compare Barrington's tax rate of 1985 with somebody else's that has 100% values, then those aren't really comparing apples to apples. Home values is the other, who would have thought that a single story ranch, new construction in Barrington would be on the market for $750,000 5 years ago, 2 years ago, today. It's crazy, right? But that's the nature of the real estate market in Barrington. And so it also makes it difficult, like that real estate market is hot in Stratford also, but not the same kind of hot. It's hot in Farmington, but not the same kind of hot. And so those assessed values drive the rate up and down quite a bit also, obviously, I mean, as you know. So what this table shows is what, I showed you that $4 million number that we needed to raise from property taxes. So that's that number for the total that's raised by property taxes split from the school, town, and county. And so that's the part that actually comes to taxes. And it's 48% of what we do. And that's why the town portion of the tax rate is only 16%. And going back to,
It's the school that's bankrupting everybody.
well, yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, that's the most expensive provision of government service that we offer.
I guess,
Educators really costly.
but I'm gonna say that we've probably been underfunding our government as well. So it's not just, that. I think that,
Well, yeah, there's something.
If we could take away from the school, like, approve putting more into the town.
Right. And this is my favorite slide. I started doing this analysis 2 years ago
I like that.
to compare Barrington to other communities. And so in the first set of
that's different, right? That's-
bars here in this bar chart, our municipal tax rate of 15%, the total tax rate, puts Barrington in the 6th percentile. That means in 2022, there were exactly 8 towns in New Hampshire who had a municipal portion of their tax rate smaller than Barrington. and 220 something with a municipal portion higher. And to Scott Shepherd's point that we've been underfunding, we run an incredibly lean municipal government, incredibly lean. And maybe to a fault, because we're at a point now where even to maintain a level of service because of inflation and because of increased utilization in certain areas, whether it's ambulance rides or we have 5,000 parcels now.
More roads.
More roads to maintain. We need to increase funding in order to cover that additional. But the 6th percentile, Barrington, now this is where it gets exciting, by a population of 9,500, Barrington is the 87th percentile. There are only 13% of communities in New Hampshire that are larger by population than Barrington. But it's not all about population because the number of roads that you have makes a big difference. By land area at 46.4 square miles.
13% larger.
There's only 13% of New Hampshire towns and cities that have a higher population than Barrington.
It's hard to
Right? It's mind blowing because we're the small rural town, right?
Right.
By land area, we're the 80th percentile. There are only 20% of communities larger by land area than Barrington. Valuation is the, how property rich a community is. And that drives a lot in municipal services and municipal costs. We're the 83rd percentile. There's only 17% of communities in the state that have more value in their community. Now, these green bars next to it, if you take the municipal tax rate, the municipal portion of the tax rate, which in 2023 is $2.66, right? Your total tax rate is $16.69. The municipal portion is $2.66. That portion, that 15%, corrected for population. So think of this as municipal tax rate per capita. Puts us in the 8th percentile compared to other municipalities. So we have a huge town by population, but we're in the 8th percentile for a municipal tax rate. That's how I know that we run a lean government. For valuation, it's 14th percentile. For land area, it's 9th percentile. We have over 80 lane miles of roads that we maintain in this 46 square mile community. 80th percentile by size, but our per capita, per acre, per mile, per square mile, per land unit of the municipal tax rate puts us in the 9th percentile, stacked up against all the rest of the towns and cities in New Hampshire. And so that is, that's where, Scott Shepherd, when he says, we have probably been underfunding, we really probably have been. And I don't think that's a bad thing because I don't think people are really hurting for services. But who's hurting right now is the departments that have this increased demand for services that are trying to meet or maintain that level of service. And I just wanted to go, if I do this one, I made some maps. I didn't make them because I don't do GIS, but I had Stratford Regional Planning make some maps. I think I put most of them. Sorry, you guys didn't really probably stick around for this. Yeah, here they are. So 87th percentile. I gotta go to the Barrington is small.
That amazed me, those figures.
So
14, yeah.
This is the Barrington is big slide, right? By population, by land area, by total value, every red town or city highlighted here is smaller than Barrington. Only
In what measure?
This is population, this was his value.
Oh, yeah, okay,
This one
I'm
is land
sorry.
area.
I see.
And look, land area, we're talking northern tier communities, a completely different makeup than Barrington. Population, we're talking about the city centers, right? There's Concord, there's Laconia, there's Manchester and Derry and Portsmouth and Dover. And we're lumped in with all of them when it comes to the amount of residents that we're providing services for.
Explores me. It does.
So let me go down to the summary
What's the blue?
page. Was there blue?
Yeah, you got on the other one, you had some.
The gray is data unavailable.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a couple, because everybody doesn't get their tax rate set right away because they probably don't have good.
Some of those are unincorporated towns.
And some of them are unincorporated. So each of these is comparing Barrington's municipal tax rate as a portion of the total tax rate, or per land area, or per property value, or per population, or just the dollar value of municipal tax rate. You stack them all next to each other. Only those in red have a smaller municipal tax rate per whichever metric in each of these maps. And so if you look per land area, of course, it's all, mostly northern tier communities.
Pittsburgh.
Right. The total tax rate, we have a couple of neighbors, but we're talking rural parts of the state. Per population, okay, of course, we're talking about the population centers. These cities that have a tremendous amount of population have a smaller portion there. So yeah, it's a crazy dynamic. And so while you're thinking about messaging for everything else, help me spread this message far and wide. Make sure residents understand, where we are.
And I can say as part of the budget, I don't want to speak for you. I mean, we look at every penny that they spend, right down to literally every penny. I got to tell you, I'm impressed. They are very frugal. They are very measured in how they spend. I think we have a great government. Just my personal opinion.
Okay, should we call it a night?
Indeed.
I could talk Barrington. You guys are keeping me from burping a baby and changing diapers, so what more can we talk about?
Is that bad?
No, I love it. I love it. Marjorie, Bill, thank you for joining us.
All right, good night.